So hi everybody, it's T Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Oracle of the Self. This is the group coaching calls that we do every Monday. And so today we're going to kind of take a little jump away from what we were doing last time around because I'll just explain it. This is the first time that I've actually ever tried to teach this material to what I consider to be the public. So always, I've taught either groups of people inside of corporate settings. So there was actually some structure I was coming into it with because I knew what the client's goals, objectives, challenges, et cetera, were. So I've really never had to start at the very beginning. You know, I've never had to really do that. And so I'm learning as I go. And one of the things that I've learned is that it is perhaps the best place to start with a group such as yourselves, with a path of self-discovery, rather than jumping right into the change grid. Now, they happen in rapid succession, so don't think there's a big jump. But this piece coming first, I think, is going to be a useful thing for you. And I'll be curious to know at the end of today's coaching session if you guys found this particular part of the training, as useful as I would hope that you would. So I'm going to chat a couple of handouts over to you. And those of you that are listening to the recordings, you'll find links to the handouts in the description block below the video. But for now, let me just go ahead and chat over to all of you. These two handouts, why is that over there? So this first one is what we referred to in the good old days as a path planner or the path walk form. If you were working one-on-one with a ChangeWorks coach or an Oracle of the Self guide, they would tell you that the very first place that you begin is walk the path. And we would often say that to people who were already familiar with this technique. We'd say, look, you've got to walk the path, walk the path, walk the path. And that's where it begins. I guess that's why this is actually Form A. So I've just chatted it over to all of you. If you'd like to take a moment to at least drag that to your desktop, you can always download it whenever you want. But I'm going to open it up and share it with you on my screen so I can kind of walk through what we'll be doing with it. So this is the PDF file that I just sent to all of you. In the good old days, this goes back to 1984. That should tell you, this goes back to 1984. We were very much using these footprints as our kind of symbol for what each of these steps along the path of self-discovery is really all about. So, oh, wait, nothing in the chat. Oh, just a second. Thank you, Boris, for telling me that. Got to include everybody. Someday I'll learn how this all works. Okay, so now it should be sent to everybody. So this is the chart. So basically, what the path of self-discovery says is this. Whenever you've got something on your mind, and whether that's an issue that you find yourself involved in, or whether that's a goal you're working on, a problem that you're trying to resolve, whatever it is. So whenever you find yourself occupied by something, find yourself puzzled by something, it's good to pull out the path of self-discovery and walk the path. And so the path of self-discovery has 5 steps that we're going to focus on for all of you. I'm going to add a 6th one to it as we get into the PowerPoint presentation. But you have to come up with whatever the subject area happens to be. And usually we would just write it up here. So if I said something like getting everything ready for the big event on Saturday, then I'm going to walk the path about this. And so the first step of the path of self-discovery is to explore the current situation. And so as you want to stop for a second and stop thinking about problems and all the things that are, just stop for a second and say, where am I right now? What is the current inventory of the things that I have happening around me right now? So what are the assets that I have, et cetera? So we want to define the current situation. We'll walk through that in slower as we work our way through the PowerPoint, but this is where you just write down some key points about the current situation. These things tend to be very factual, concrete, those sorts of things. They tend to be rather neutral in their objective. They're not swayed all that easily. They are. It's the current situation. Just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. Well, after you finish that step, the next thing you would do is move on to the green step. And we continue to use the colors. The colors have a really interesting mnemonic sort of device attached to them that we used to teach very early on, and it kind of fell by the wayside. But nevertheless, it's always there. We never throw anything away. But the desired situation. So, what is it that you want, and why do you want it? So if you think about that situation and you've looked about where you are right now, this answers the question, where do you want to go? How are you, how can you define what it is that you're trying to accomplish, what it's going to look like, sound like, smell like, whatever the case may be? Why is it important to you? This is all the expanded kind of goal definition. As you work your way through this program, you're going to be going through an even deeper exercise to help you understand what you really want. One of the things that we find is sad but true is that the problem with achieving one's goals is that people really didn't do a thorough exploration of the goal to begin with. And because of that, they end up overestimating certain things, underestimating certain things, ignoring certain things altogether, missing things, whatever the case may be. And so it ends up that their goal was not really built on any kind of a solid foundation. And so we really have to help people get in there and clean up. What is this goal? Is it really your goal? Going back to some of the Oracle, the self stuff that we've started talking about already. Is it really yours? Is it somebody else's? What's going on there? So current situation, desired situation. And then the next thing we're going to do is take a look at the obstacles. What's in your way of getting there? So we like to look at it this way. If you know where you're at and you know where you're trying to go, why aren't you already there? So I'll do that again in slow motion, and anyone's welcome to unmute and chime in your thoughts anytime you want. But if you know where you're at, you know the current situation, you know where you're starting from, and you know where you're trying to go and why you want to go there and all that kind of stuff, why aren't you already there?
Something is blocking our path.
Something is blocking our path. There is some obstacle or set of obstacles, real or imagined, that are in your way. I'll say that again. There is some obstacle or set of obstacles, real or imagined, that are in your way. Until those obstacles are addressed, what's the chances of you reaching your desired situation? Anybody want to unmute and throw in the obvious answer?
Small.
Small, right? Pretty remote. So this is what's stopping you from getting there. It's so interesting to us. Whenever we look at any kind of coaching methodologies, or we look at any kind of goal setting and goal achievement strategies that are out there, and there are millions of them to be looking at, they seem to ignore this step altogether. They seem to spend a whole lot of time getting you to really look at the desired situation and envision it and feel it and look at what the values are and on and off. That's all good stuff. But then they want to jump past this obstacle step and move right into solution. How are we going to reach that goal? So forget white, green, black, yellow. They go white, green, yellow. I know where I'm at. I know where I want to go. Let's build our plan to get there. Well, unfortunately, as they start to put in place these strategies, approaches, things to reach that goal, at least in part because the goal has not been thoroughly explored, they encounter obstacles. And the moment they encounter one of those obstacles, as they walk down this yellow brick road, what happens to their progress? It's going to stop. And then they're going to not be able to ignore the obstacle. Again, obstacles are real or imagined. Well, if they're imagined, we can get rid of them just by changing your thought process around a certain thing. But if it's a real obstacle that's standing in your way, a physical obstacle of some sort, that might be time constraints, it might be money constraints, maybe you don't have the help that you need, the tools that you need, the whatever, there is some obstacle, real or imagined, that's in your way. And we need a solution that isn't focused on achieving the goals. It is focused on getting rid of the obstacles, because we believe this with every fiber of our being, that if there were no obstacles, where would you already be? and someone can unmute, you can chime in the obvious if you want, but
That's your goal.
you'd be at your goal, you'd be
Done.
at your desired situation. So this is our kind of overall critique of the world of personal growth and development, specifically when it comes to getting into goal development, which is pretty much what it's all about. We need to appreciate that this obstacle step is an element that is going to come up sooner or later, in which case it is better for it to be explored sooner so that we can plan accordingly. Some of those obstacles may be so obviously in our path that we know we're going to encounter them. Why should I stick my head in the sand? Why should I ignore that this is something that's really worth looking at? And I promise you, if you go out there and start looking at any kind of books on personal growth, development, et cetera, sooner or later they're going to get around to this goal setting thing. And don't be at all surprised if they say, you got to know where you're at and you got to know where you want to go. And then you can start developing the plans and strategies, et cetera. Some of them do acknowledge that there are some obstacles that need to be looked at, but even they want to minimize what that obstacle is all about. So we'll get to the last one in just a second, but any of you that are on the call that are ChangeWorks certified already, you know this, that when someone asks me what I do for a living, I have always said to them, I help people identify and eliminate the obstacles that stand between where they are and where they want to go. So I'll say that again, and you can see this. So what I help people do is identify the obstacles that stand between where they are and where they want to go. I believe that if I can serve as that dragon slayer, as that obstacle remover, the individual has within themselves plenty of insights, strategies, experiences, et cetera, that could help them just move to that desired state. There are no obstacles in their way. They will already be there. So I don't need to take credit for your achievement of your goals. I take credit for helping you get rid of obstacles. So that's how we look at it. Any comments, thoughts about white, green, black, yellow? White, green, black, yellow? No?
T, talk a little bit about how you design the green questions and the black questions to achieve a particular outcome.
Yeah, well, in fact, let me see if I already have a slide on that, and in which case we'll get into the slides. I think I do, yeah. So let me just finish by saying at a certain point of using a white, green, black, and yellow tend to be very logically ruled. So these are things that are happening, as you learned last time around, when you're more in the power response state. So, so these are all logical, practical, kind of straightforward things. Well, we are not beings of pure logic. We have gaps in what our logic can prove to us as being real. And so sooner or later, we're going to turn to these internal thoughts, feelings, hunches, instincts, intuitions, values, beliefs, whatever words you want to throw into the pile for all that. Sooner or later, we need to look at that, but it needs to be in the proper place. And in our way of looking at things, I'd like to let my logical faculties, I'd like to let my higher brain, my cortex, do what it does so well before I say, all right, let's go knock on the door of the limbic system. Let's go knock on the door of our thoughts and feelings and all this internal stuff and see what's going on. Now, why is that important? It's important because if you go white, green, black, yellow, and you say, yeah, we've just come up with solutions that will get rid of those obstacles, and that ensures us the achievement of whatever that desired situation happens to be, based on where we're starting from, obviously. Well, if you then move on to the red step, this last little step of the whole thing, and some voice inside of you, again, think back to that choir of the self, sort of chorus of the self we talked about, chorus of the mind. If some part of that is saying to you, I don't care what it looks like on paper, it does not feel right to me, I would suggest that you heed that warning, and that you realize that although we cannot point to the organ of the body that is receiving and absorbing whatever this feeling is that you have, obviously you are sensing something in the environment that is somehow or another relating to your past history, and neurochemistry is coming into play. Something is creating this feeling, and it should not be tossed aside. It should not be ignored. It needs to be explored. And so, Brian, if you're in a place where you can unmute, if you want to unmute and throw in a couple of things about this whole thought that not everything that a human needs is going to come through the logical pathway, that could be useful to us. If you can't unmute, then I'll move on. But there you are. If you can, oh yay, go ahead.
T, I have a question.
Yeah.
Don't your feelings and intuition have a lot to do with obstacles before you come to the solution? Of
You
what
are in fact
want to do?
correct. Yeah, remember we said that obstacles, there are the black step is where we have the reason why you are not at your desired outcome is because there is some obstacle or set of obstacles, real or imagined. And imagined is just the word that we use to encompass everything that can be going on in your mind. And so you're absolutely right. There can be all kinds of thoughts and feelings and hunches and intuitions and little voices in your head that are creating obstacles that really don't exist in reality, but they seem to exist in your reality. Well, as a coach or as a ChangeWorks practitioner or as an Oracle of Self guide, I need to help people to identify those things because obstacles of the mind are addressed by tools of the mind. And obstacles of practicality, practical matters are obviously have to have practical solutions to them. So it's two different ways of going about helping a person to overcome whatever these obstacles may be. And I don't mind saying at this early juncture of the exploration that there are infinitely more obstacles of the mind than there are obstacles in reality. Usually people can rather quickly identify the obstacles in reality when given the assignment to do so. It's a short list and it's probably complete, even though it's short, but obstacles of the mind, these are the ones that are coming into play. And in fact, Brian, if I said to you that it may very well be that the limbic system is detecting something in that thought that it feels as being threatening. And so it's going to create this obstacle of the mind. So we have to get, because it's trying to save us. I'm babbling, you talk, Brian, have at it.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there because you got to remember the limbic system and those processes there, like the hippocampus, hypothalamus, all of these are autonomic nervous system processes. And so they're picking up on things somatically that you might not realize, which is why it's important to do the white step. You're like stopping, surveying your environment, whether it's internal, external. Then you can label it appropriately, or at least you're positioned to. Because if you just go with the feeling, again, and it's not appropriated in the right way, then you set yourself up. And it may not be, again, what you're experiencing. So a lot of times it may be something underneath that. We label things, but a lot of times it's not that thing. It's something associated with that thing.
Right. And so if you're having one of these feelings, it is best for you to stop for a second and explore that. And the way Brian just said you'd explore it is by walking the path of self-discovery, again, because maybe the feeling that you have is one of anxiety that something is going bad to happen. Well, you might want to go back to the white step and say, well, what exactly is happening? And then you may very quickly be able to say there is zero evidence of that being part of the current situation. So all this other effort is unnecessary. So it is possible that your walk along the path can end at the white step. So that might be good. Maybe, just maybe, one of the things in the current situation is that you might be saying, I'm under a tremendous amount of pressure from other things. And that's what it is. Well, if that's the current situation, we need to deal with that by helping you address this pressure kind of thing. So what currently is causing you this feeling of pressure? What is the reality? What are these tasks or responsibilities? What's causing this pressure? And then we can set a goal as far as addressing that pressure, see what obstacles there are, and come up with a solution. So whenever these feelings do arise, my important thing for you is that you don't ignore them. Now, what I'm hoping for more often than not is that as this person progresses through, again, they're looking at a particular situation. So what's the current situation as far as that issue is concerned, desired situation? What are the obstacles that they face? How are they going to overcome those obstacles? Let's say they do an exceptionally fine job of these 4 steps. You would think, well, then have at it. But I'm not done. I want people to develop an emotional connection with that solution, an emotional connection with liberating themselves from the obstacles, an emotional connection with achieving that desired situation, of getting from where they are to where they want to be. So I need some emotion to come into play. Well, that is not up in the cortex. And so sooner or later, we are going to visit our neighbors on the other side of our brain and just say, how do you really feel about this? And what we're hoping is that that red step answers that question by saying, this feels really good to me. This feels right. I'm on board because I want that emotional connection to lead to a certain level of commitment, of engagement and execution. One of the layers we'll be exploring on the ChangeGrid in detail is this layer that reveals the level of engagement you're experiencing from pre-awareness all the way through execution. And I think it's an interesting thing to look at as you learn more and more about yourself and about the response states. But just kind of know that this whole piece of paper exists as nothing more than a little planning sheet, so that if you guys find yourself in any kind of a situation, anytime, doesn't have to even be profound, you can do it on simple stuff too, that you just say, I want to discipline my mind to approach any kind of issue I encounter in a very disciplined sort of way that helps me to make the highest quality decisions in the shortest amount of time, without the interference of emotions too soon in the process. All right, anyone want to unmute and tell me what you think about what I just said about the position for emotions? Yep.
This is T. Just a thought, because the feelings and emotion, there needs to be a connection to ensuring that obstacle is at least removed.
Yes.
Could it be that we could have, since there's multiple obstacles, could there be multiple pathways and stuff, to look at this?
Yes, in fact, I would suggest to you that every obstacle creates its own path walk.
Okay.
So you're going through that. And the other thing I would say is that each obstacle is going to need its own unique solution. Because again, sometimes they're obstacles of the mind, other times they're practical obstacles. So the solution set is going to have to contain both the tasks that have to be performed as we take care of the practical matters, and there's work to be done, but the work to be done on obstacles of the mind are a bit more work. And yeah, you can do a lot of it yourself, and by the time you finish this program, you should be able to do a great deal of it on yourself or with a peer. But bottom line is, these have to be addressed, and it can sometimes take work to really help someone get over deeply ingrained beliefs, values that serve as obstacles, not only in perhaps this one situation we're looking at, but could be rearing its head again and again and again. And I wasn't going to mention this, but you're the gifted students officially. And so there's also a path walk that kind of covers our whole life. And that means there are obstacles that we might have been carrying for our whole life. And until we decide to address these obstacles or shed these obstacles, they are going to travel with us as baggage that's going to, in one way or another, impact the great majority of these kinds of situations we might find ourselves in. And so I would say to you that as much as I can, I would like to compartmentalize my thoughts, feelings, all these internal processes, but I'm doing it consciously and deliberately in this particular exercise. I'm not saying that you want to change who you are and how you operate and cast your feelings and intuitions and instincts aside forever. I'm saying when we're trying to really come up with a great solution to something, can we please just put that aside for just a few minutes while we work our way through the logical part of this process? So Yep.
Yeah. And that's why what T asked is important, because if you think about what the emotions are designed to do, we're literally designed to give emotions a moto, remember in Latin, it's
Right.
movement.
Right.
So we're
Good move.
designed to give it the upper hand because it's processing information uniquely different than cortex, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
the
Well, in fact,
cortex will be very focused,
yeah, Brian,
whereas
in fact, throw in that a lot of the limbic system is very primal.
very
So
primal. So when you
very primal.
So that's, the midbrain processes, and it processes information like 10 times faster than the cortex. And so those things, again, they're connected to the autonomic nervous system. So it happens automatically. So something can happen, all of a sudden your heart rate starts breathing, right?
Mhm,
That
mhm.
fast. So you have sympathetic reaction. That's the hypothalamus acting out. And so now you have to sit and figure out, well, what's going on? Why is this happening now? Like, what's going on around me? What's going on within me? Am I, overwhelmed with something? And so it allows you to open up. But what most people do when they're experiencing emotions is resist. And you can't resist and learn at the same time. One is going to cancel out the other.
Mhm, mhm. Yep.
T, there's something interesting you're bringing up for me is the fact that deferring the feelings and intuition till later is critically important, because if you don't, what you end up sometimes doing is falling in love with the situation and
Mhm.
miscalculating the obstacles that actually exist. So
Absolutely
you
right.
can't discover the solutions that you need.
That's right. That's right. And what's not helping that situation, as bleak as that situation is that a great many authors, experts, et cetera, in this field of human development may actually tell you that you don't want to acknowledge the obstacles at all. There's a school of thought that if you were working in their methodology and you came up with some sort of an obstacle, they would say that's what you want to set aside. Because,
Well, yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
appreciative inquiry does that.
Oh, is that what that is? Yeah,
Mhm.
appreciative inquiry is the belief that anything that's wrong with a situation can be fixed by everything that is right.
Right.
And I don't deny that. I'm just not afraid of obstacles because I live in a real world and they're there.
Well, and I think that if you, one thing I always remember is they said, if you don't address something, you're going to repeat it again and again and again. So you can appreciate a whole lot, but you still need to really look at that obstacle. But
Mhm.
sometimes I think as a consultant, I'm not the right person to work on all of those feelings and intuition. It might need to be deeper.
Mhm, mhm,
So
mhm.
it's like, when do I recommend that they go see a person who focuses in on that?
Yeah, that I can answer for you pretty easily. I just need to get a ChangeGrid real quick. But anyone else on the call, you want to answer that for T? Do you have a thought about when is it time to turn over the situation to a different type of human development professional?
I've often reached that point when I find a general lack of awareness and an inability to create that awareness within the individual.
Okay, and so what might that look like behaviorally or sound like in their languaging?
They just don't see the problem. They don't see it as an issue. They don't feel responsible. They don't feel accountable. They don't feel attached to it at all. They're just, kind of unaware of the situation and what impact they're having.
Hey, isn't the fact that you're asking the question is the answer?
Yeah, exactly. Tell us more about that. Yes. Is that Susan?
Yeah,
Yeah, Susan, feel free. So when we ask the question, the thing is about knowing the answer.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you see something that someone that's not living or going in the direction that they're supposed to, that's telling you that maybe you've done your job and
Well, you're
you
right.
need to encourage them to go, further or go to someone else.
Right. When you feel like you've kind of reached the end of what it is that you were trying to do with them, I want to show you or give you an illustration of how what you're describing actually plays out on the ChangeGrid. So let me just pull up The composite, no, let's look at this one. Actually, I want to look at this one. The answer to the question as originally posed is you definitely want to hand off to another type of professional anytime you encounter a client who is plotting in any of the danger zones. And it's not like a temporary visit to the danger zone, but they tend to be having a congregation of those activities in the danger zones. And so very quickly, I'll go around this and tell you why I think that at a certain point in time, you want to hand off to either a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, a formally trained interventionist, whatever it happens to be. But any thoughts about that? Those are our change. And those of you who don't know what the heck danger zones are, I promise you'll know what they are. It's when our way of thinking starts to become toxic to ourselves.
I think that's a really good a place. And I was thinking danger zones, and I would put that there, but I put it out there for a question to either confirm.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. Look, I'm going to give it the old college try. They're my client. So, with all due respect to those who are on the phone that are not, or on the call that are not human development professionals, this is our business. Our business is helping people identify and eliminate obstacles. Well, along with that job, we have to help people get better at defining their current situation, their desired situation. But those are almost incidental to where our real value is. We are experts at identifying and eliminating obstacles. So all those obstacles find their own home on the ChangeGrid. And this idea about danger zones is just saying that there are certain sets of perceptions that end up becoming problematic. So I'll give you the first one. Think about someone who perceives about a given situation. Again, I'll say it a lot, but I have to say it after you guys have heard me a few times. The ChangeGrid is not talking about the person. It's talking about how the person is dealing with a particular situation. We're looking at the situation more so than we are looking at the personality of the individual. But that said, let's say that you're someone who perceives your ability as being extremely high. Give yourself a 10, an 11, or 12, or the ability 10, 11, 12. But the challenge is also a 10, 11, or a 12. So when challenge is high and ability is high, 10, 11, 12, you put those together, you're going to end up in the outgrid danger zone. The outgrid danger zone is a place, we talked about people being confident along the center area because they're in power. Again, let me pass over to all of you the quick reference guide if I have it handy. I sent you the quick reference guide on the last call. So I'll send it again once I make my little point here. This individual is in power, and power sounds really good, but power at an extreme becomes problematic. The people who are this far outgrid believe that the laws of the physical universe do not apply to them. They create policies on the fly purely because they think it's going to work. They're giant risk takers. They create risk where it doesn't exist purely to make things more interesting. They tend to be, again, I'm talking about the person. If they were plotting heavily, repeatedly in this area, then I would say to you, you are very likely to encounter an individual who has a very inflated sense of self, who could be very, egomaniac kind of behavior. They don't handle conflict or they handle conflict by fighting, and they fight to the death. And so if you apply that generalize that to how a person might be operating with everybody in all areas of their life, I will tell you that me as a trainer, coach, consultant type of person is neither equipped to deal with this extreme or interested in dealing with this extreme, because I think you're in harm's way. You are truly in physical, emotional, intellectual harm's way if you walk into an interaction with this individual without knowing how to carry yourself, defend yourself, whatever it is. Do you guys agree with me on that? Those that are human development professionals, what do you do when you end up with this bull in the china shop?
Yep.
And it's who they are.
That's where T sometimes, when coaching just doesn't work and you really got to pass them along to another professional.
Mm-hmm. Right. And even that other professional may truly be able to do nothing about it. But I would say to you that anyone who lives in the outgrid danger zone, this is where someone becomes profoundly narcissistic, very embattled or whatever. They minimize the value of other people, and they'll say it in no uncertain terms. They really do have this grandiose sense of self and well, that's going on. Well, I'm sure there's plenty of professionals out there who will give it the professional try, but we may very well go, no, this person just happens to be, poster child for an a-hole. So, it's like they're out there and there are a lot of them. So certainly I would do that. When it comes to this person who's in, any final comments about the outgrid danger zone? Then let me turn this into coaching for all you guys. It's important to me that you be able to connect what I'm talking about to real life. And so do you know someone who finds themselves in this outgrid danger zone, perhaps too frequently? So again, to end up there, they have to believe their ability to handle a particular situation is extremely high. And the challenge that they meet is also extremely high. There's a superhero kind of a complex that you have to count on them. No one can do it, et cetera, et cetera. You guys all understand what toxic narcissism actually can be.
Yeah, they kind of end up burning themselves out.
Sooner or later, and they become to kind of numb the pain, because the big pain that these people are actually experiencing is the pain that all these people that are behind them just don't get it and can't step up and do what needs to be done, and so I can't count. This is me, this outgrid person talking. I can't count on them. They're all liabilities. And so if I can get any value out of any of them, I know it's temporary. And so fine, I got to deal with all this. But if everyone would just recognize that I'm the supreme commander of the universe, then all would be fine. And again, this occurs in all areas of life. We've all worked with people who are like that. We probably have people in our social circles that tend to think that particular way. Well, so I just wanted to make sure that you guys can think about that, but also recognize that this is not something that is limited to the person. It may very well be that a person who is never living out there, that's not who they are, how they are, may encounter a specific situation where they become that energy. They become, we just said energy. They become that energy because that energy is what it's going to take in that moment to get something done. So let me give you one quick example of that. And we've done this before, I think. We talk about Olympic athletes. An Olympic athlete who actually views themselves as being of the caliber that could walk away with a gold medal has no doubt whatsoever that they are highly able to do whatever that task happens to be. So in this case, the task is bring home a medal. Well, they're going to believe their ability is very, very high, and they can look at their proven track record to show that they're the favorite for a reason. So they got the ability. But the Olympic athlete does not underestimate the challenge of the competition that lay before them. If they thought the competition was going to be easy, then their perceived challenge would actually be low, and they'd be down in apathy about that particular competition. If an Olympic athlete is going to be experiencing the energy of apathy during the competition, this is going to affect their performance. And so instead, top-ranked athletes tend to view others in a very clear, logical way. They know who they're up against, and they know that winning that medal or whatever could be measured in thousandths of a second. And so they get it. They don't underestimate the challenge that they're up against, but they have to kind of move themselves into this super performance mode where they have to be ready to fight the fight that needs to be fought. And they understand there, by the way, though, that the people that they're fighting with know the rules as well and are also there to fight. So this is where a battle can occur. This is where sporting events are won. I'm not a football fan, but I know that last night's game was a really, really good game. I mean, it was close to the very end and all that. Pardon me. Well, it shouldn't surprise you that during the game, the athletes are very much out here in that outgrid danger zone, believing they're the greatest that ever did, that can't be won without them, and on and on and on. That mindset is serving them well in that moment. But if they take that mindset home to their family and their friends and the business that is actually operating behind the world of football or whatever it happens to be, they can end up damaging so many relationships that they end up killing all of their support off. And then they end up all alone. They have people have watched the behavior for too long that now people are starting to view that behavior through a very negative lens, and they're starting to turn their back and ultimately shun the individual who tends to be too far out grid.
And that's why they need that. I've been delving into a lot of sports medicine research to look at human performance at work, right? Because they're professionals. And so what you just described, like professional athletes, when they're out grid like that, they dial in on recovery. Like that's a key part of their strategy, because it's not sustainable to be out there for long periods of time with no recovery.
Well,
So
right.
they need the recovery, plus they do prehabilitation. There's things that they do even before the game.
Yep. And I think too that they need to be beyond the physical training they're going through. We have to make sure we're doing some work with them on the emotional intelligence side of things as well. They need to become better skilled at managing their internal environment after the battle is over. And I'll give you one quick example of this. Again, I'm not a sports person. I don't know why I've got these sports examples today, but a couple of weeks ago, I saw something in the paper. I only read headlines. I don't read articles. I only read headlines. And the headline was that this star football player on some team, was it football? It might've been soccer. Don't know. Think it was football. Don't know. Anyway, some play happened and it got called and somebody was injured. And so medics came out on the field to help this injured individual. And this player from the team that caused the injury shoved the medic. So I don't know if you guys remember that, but they shoved the medic. So there are a lot of consequences when you lay your hands on someone who is not, playing the game. And they had a lot about, they had to apologize. It wasn't the first time they'd done it. I guess they'd done it a couple of times already, but don't hurt the people that are there to help you when your turn comes to get hurt. So, yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's the outgrid danger zone. How many of you again can acknowledge that you have experienced these people in your life and or experienced people who have had moments when they were there in their life that might have served them well, might have not served them well, but do you know what I'm talking about when I talk about the outgrid danger zone and why it's dangerous?
Absolutely.
All right.
I think also too, I've been there
Yeah,
at probably all of them.
Yeah.
And that it probably heightens my awareness of what I had to do to move through those.
Right. And I do believe that if we can get into the problem with these four extremes, as you guys will learn, is that our higher brain is pretty much turned off at this point in time. This is all very much self-preservation, self-orientation, whatever it happens to be. So they're really not looking at the facts. Well, if we can train people to recognize when they are going into this mode, and then they can, because of that recognition, they can decide whether or not that mode is going to serve them well or not. And then maybe, just maybe, if they recognize it's not going to serve them well, they can learn how to move themselves into the healthier areas of their change grid. So I think
I put together a product called the Behavioral Journal. And it sounds like exactly what you're talking about. When a negative event occurs, you record the date, the people, the event, and the feeling. And if you do that over a long enough period of time, you see patterns and trends in the data, and you get a hold of your own reactions.
Yeah.
And that's how people come to learn to avoid certain situations.
Exactly. If I'm dealing with someone who has an anger management problem, and again, I would hand off to somebody else. Once I knew that it's a real problem, it wasn't just like one event or whatever. If I know it's a problem, they've got this awareness is the first step. And if we can let them know, not only are they aware of it, but they need to be aware of the impact that that has on others in their life, other things they might value. So they need to not only recognize the behavior, but the price tag associated with the behavior in order for them to begin to even think about. I mean, they weren't even aware of it. So we gotta create that awareness that they have the problem before we can do anything about it.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm hoping, by the way, people that are going through this program, as regular consumers or people that are just watching this on YouTube, understand that all of the work we do is about trying to help an individual become a more functional, more vibrant, healthy, happy, productive kind of person in whatever areas of their life they really want us to help them with. That's the goal of all this. And while it's great that there are professionals who can help you, there's a great deal of this stuff you can really learn to do better yourself. And that's why it's the oracle of the self. It's you talking to you about you. This is you walking the path. This is, it's all about you. Okay, anyway, so that's the upgrade danger zone. And by the way, I know we've gone off on a tangent, so no one's dropped off the call. So that tells me at least find the tangent interesting. But there's also a danger zone that occurs upgrid. And that is when you find yourself in a situation where you perceive the challenge as being extremely high, but your perceived ability to meet that challenge as very, very low. Now, envision for yourself because you can only envision something for yourself. Why did I say that? So yeah, envision a situation where you find yourself with your life in a threatened kind of place. So, a lot of what happens up here is driven by instinct. And so you're out for a walk in the woods and you hear a twig snap behind you. Well, in that very moment, most people are going to have their perceived level of challenge go way up and their perceived level of ability shrink way down because they don't know what's really threatening them accurately yet. They just believe that a threat is present. And so they don't really know what ability they would have to have. So the best instinctual response you could have to that is to have your perceived ability go down to nothing and your perceived challenge skyrocket, because that's going to trigger in your limbic system all of the self-preservation survival instincts that are part of every human being since the very, very beginning, or we'd all be gone by now. And so this is where we become heightened in our alert. Our senses become far more attuned to gathering the data they were designed to gather. Why? But because there may very well be a true threat. Now, take yourself out of, did you guys, again, I read headlines, sorry, some plane taken off from Hawaii, I think, ended up shortly after takeoff doing a deep dive until they were almost like 700 feet from the water surface. And then they were able to climb again. Did you guys see this? It just happened this morning.
No.
So I got to tell you, I'd be up in this upgrade danger zone. If I was up in that plane, I mean, that's our worst nightmare. It's almost, we hopefully no one got seriously injured as that was going on, but you get the idea. When we find ourselves in certain circumstances where we know we are really out of control of what's going on, well, then we know we don't have the ability, the challenge is extremely high, and all that instinctual stuff is going to come to our aid. Don't know if it'll help us escape the bear or not, but nevertheless, that's what that's all about. Now, there are people who live up there. And again, I would pass on to another professional if I was dealing with someone who was always panicked, always dealing with high levels of anxiety, fears or reactions to things that aren't even happening, but they are perceiving very vividly as to what's going on. This is where delusions come into play. This is when those, I would say we talked about those, we said that emotions are either going to be, oh my God, I've been babbling for so long about this. Emotions are either going to be
Very high.
Yeah, it's going to be very high. I actually have a name for it: resourceful or unresourceful. There we go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's on the chart I just sent to everybody, and I decided to draw a blank. I guess it's because I'm upgrade. But nevertheless, you forget to look at the facts. You forget to do all these kinds of things. You're being very much driven by the instinctual aspects associated with stress. So I would pass off this person if there was a pattern. If I'm encountering an individual who's got one, maybe two little things that are up there, and they're not truly in a life or death situation where intervention is required, they're just really wound up about something that they may just need to talk about, and talking about it could get them out of that danger zone into a healthier, more workable area of life on the change grid. But we got to do something there. So we'll give it the old college try. But if you go like, no, this person is just really out there, they're really, their delusions are things they're afraid of, as opposed to delusions of grandeur, which we'd encounter out grid, these delusions of threats all around you, paranoia, all that sort of stuff, I may need to hand off when I see that pattern. Another situation that I may want to hand off to another individual is if they're in the downgrid danger zone. To be in the downgrade danger zone. And again, I always want to make sure you guys are making connection with this. Do you know anyone who is living upgrid, whose immediate response to everything that goes on is to end up in a danger zone where they feel like there's some threat? You know, they're magnifying their response in some disproportionate sort of way to whatever's going on. So do you know people who live up there? Do you recognize when you perhaps have gotten up into that state, or someone you know and care about got up into that state? Know that this is real, and it can happen to otherwise healthy people in terms of their mental and physical health, but it can also end up growing into a very unhealthy place to be on the change grid. Anyway, back to the very far down grid. This one I know you know plenty of people for. These are the people who believe that they are in a situation that they have so much ability to handle that there's no challenge whatsoever. 0, maybe a 1, maybe a 2. But these are things that have become so routine, so predictable, so autopilot that you believe you can do them with your eyes closed. So you don't even need to be conscious to do some of the things that would be happening in this downgrid danger zone. So these are people who, in their worst case scenario, would have lots of life activities plotting downgrid, or this is their natural way of responding to a situation of downgrid, where they are going to minimize the challenge and perhaps inflate perceived ability so they think they're actually as safe can be when we know a threat actually might exist. So these are people who, you know, if you think about kids, maybe it's that lazy teenager, the lazy college kid who's not thinking about where they're actually going to work, because right now when it comes to life, they got nothing causing them any tension. Forget stress. They don't have anything that puts them up in power stress, where they're excited about doing something, or power where they're determined to do it, or power apathy where they're finalizing it so that it can be, you know, left for others to tap into whenever they need to. Nope, they're in apathy about the whole thing. They don't care. They haven't cared for a long while. They're unlikely to start caring. And so they'll go through autopilot. They'll become active enough in order to do the minimum to get whatever it is taken care of. So these people could be very lazy, slovenly, just people that have no ambition, no intention, but they got enough going on in their life to bring them enough resources that they're not starving and they're not sleeping under the stars. So any of you know someone who might be the poster child for this level of sloth? Yeah, there's somebody out there, but you know, and these individuals, if they're that far down grid, I believe that what comes along with this is two things: depression and addiction. Addiction might also occur out grid or up grid, but it's more incidental. This is a person trying to escape, to numb themselves from the sheer boredom of existence that goes on, because they believe they are brilliant on all tasks. They're know-it-alls. And again, what they're saying is that I have a profoundly high level of ability and nothing I'm encountering is giving me any challenge that requires me to be engaged in any way whatsoever. And so they're going to disconnect, but not in a healthy way. They're just going to, what do I say, the kid that lives in their parents' basement. You know, So we live in over 55 community. That word alone should tell you who should live here, over 55. But the rule is that someone in the household must be over 55. And so I wonder how many of these 17,000 houses here in Sun City West are occupied by the children who aren't there to provide any kind of care and support, but are there because they don't have anywhere else to be. So these people do exist. What is far more common though? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. Is it possible for somebody to live in a place where they're bouncing between extreme upgrade and extreme downgrade?
Yeah, okay. Now, for all of you who are part of our beginners Oracle Self program, Boris has just brought up something that is among the more advanced things that we end up teaching. So I'll say this to illustrate his point. If we took the change grid as we see it on screen, and instead of looking at it as a two-dimensional diagram, we want to turn it into a three-dimensional object. We do that by, at least conceptually, print this out on a piece of fabric and then drape it on top of a ball in such a way that the center of the change grid is at one pole, and these four red dots are all going to drape down the sides of the ball. And if we tug them in just the right way, we can get them all to actually touch one another, because this dot is called the powerless point. Not powerless points. There is only one, but there are four different ways of getting there. So this is the power point. These are the powerless, but these are the powerless point, but we can get to it in four different ways. So once you're at the powerless point, these four danger zones that seem so far apart from one another actually become neighbors with one another. The downgrid, outgrid, upgrid, and ingrid danger zones are physically adjacent to one another. They line up when you put it in that spherical shape, create a change sphere. And because they're actually neighbors with one another, you can watch an individual go from being in the outgrid danger zone to the upgrid danger zone. Or if they find themselves in harm's way, they might suddenly jump into their outgrid way of self-preservation. Upgrid flees, outgrid fights. And the others do two others. There are four Fs, not just fight or flight response. There's two other things you do: fade and freeze. Yeah, so we're going to look at those, but that's what actually, so Boris, you're absolutely right. The person who is really profoundly stuck in any of these outgrid danger zones can find themselves very easily manifesting the behavior set of any of the other danger zones because they're so adjacent to one another. And I'll give you an example of this. Let me finish off the ingrid danger zone so I can give you probably one of the most powerful examples I can of this. To end up in the ingrid danger zone, you must find yourself in situation or multiple situations, a lifetime of situations where you perceive the challenges being very low. And so you've only developed very low levels of ability to meet those challenges. You're living in a very simplified life, one that is merely a subset of what life is, as the rest of us know it, created a very safe, enclosed world. So recluses will live here, but also abused people live here. They try to retreat as far as possible. They're trying to fade into the wallpaper. So they draw no attention to themselves. They may be alive, but they merely exist. There is no living that goes on here. They are, in fact, the victims of the perpetrators who we might find outgrid. These people, as they become increasingly aggressive and caring less and less about people and more about themselves and the task at hand, can become profoundly abusive to other people, groups of people, etc. And what they are trying to do is to push these people, I'll just say push you, deeper and deeper into your ingrid danger zone. So you start to minimize your self-worth. You start to believe you have no value, nothing to offer, no nothing. You're just occupying air, space, time. And these people may be the ones who are telling you that, or voices from your past may be telling you that. These are people who have deep, deep insecurities. Oh, to finish off, the downgrid person needs to meet with a professional because of the addiction, the depression, etc. that happens down here. These individuals need to see a professional because they are, let's say, deeply abused externally, but that abuse continues internally. They have completely lost themselves and need to help find themselves. They may require true physical intervention to protect themselves from perpetrators. they may need to be put into a situation where safety can be felt for a long enough period of time that they are able to stop cowering, right? Chris just chimed to everyone, they've lost their voice. And so these individuals most definitely need to work with a professional. And that professional obviously has to be prepared for what happens when these people finally find their voice again. So let me close off today, before I ask you for any questions and comments you have, to look at the dynamic that occurs between out-grid danger and in-grid danger, or out-grid people and in-grid people. Out-grid people tend to view this individual as being mousy, reticent, of no value whatsoever. So again, they're going to become the abuser. What we have to watch out for, though, is that when this individual finds their voice, they can very often become a perpetrator themselves. Those of you who have studied any kind of the abusive cycle, you know that the abused often becomes the abuser because it's the only other behavior that's been modeled for them. So now that they feel safe enough to step out from under the thumb, the pressure, the pain of this individual, they may very well become that individual and start doing that to other people. Also, what happens is when you confront someone who is living in the out-grid danger zone and say, you're just too big of a bull in a china shop, you're pushy, you're aggressive, you're blah, blah, blah. So you find another out-grid person who's willing to take them to task. Don't be at all surprised if suddenly they position themselves as being the victim. Nobody understands them. Nobody gets them. No one's really supporting them. Everyone's against them, blah, blah, blah. All those narcissistic tendencies are going to force them to find blame, and that moves them into the victim position. That was not a big change that went through a healthy part of the ChangeGrid. That was what we call dancing on the dark side. So they moved immediately from an out-grid danger zone to an in-grid danger zone behavior as a way of, I say, balancing things as best they can. They may very well move up-grid or down-grid as well, throw up their hands and just disappear altogether, or self-destruct, explode in the process. So these 4 danger zones are all physically adjacent to one another. They in turn are at their epicenter, where you'll find the powerless point. Okay. That was a lot. So if you guys want to unmute for a second and just give me some feedback. The purpose of this coaching call, was that too much, or was it interesting enough, useful enough that you're glad you heard this instead of me going in these baby steps I've mapped out to do? You tell me.
I think it was great because, again, it's just reinforcing and you thinking, oh yeah, the outward could become the inward, and the,
Right.
I mean, so it's understanding that and hearing it in a different way. So I appreciated it.
Excellent. Thanks. Yeah. And certainly, in these corporate settings, you find this happen a lot, where this person who's too far out-grid starts to attack, and sooner or later someone's going to fight back. And just have to recognize, if you are the person who's dealing with this, and very often executive coaches do get pulled into these kinds of dramas, don't be at all surprised if you hear that individual step out of the bravado of the out-grid danger zone and start displaying meekness and victimization of the in-grid, or they might just say, I forget all about it. Just I figured it out, they did, and let them suffer. That's a down-grid way of doing things. Or they might drag when you put your heels in harder, they might just say, no, I'm doubling down on this. The world is in great peril. Our company's in great peril. We're going to do blah, blah, blah. That's that up-grid reactivity sounding. Yep.
Yeah, I like the explanation of this because I like this idea of, to me, it reminds me of how the human body functions in general, right? So it's an integrated system within systems, and one system impacts another system. So
right, that's right.
It seems to me, I wish corporate America understood how complicit they are in these kinds of unproductive behaviors and different things. They don't understand that the way you structure your policies, all these things matter, right? So there's this term called presenteeism, and presenteeism is associated with rising healthcare costs.
Absolutely. they don't realize, and I don't think employees in general realize, that every business and every building a business might have, we talk about the local culture as well, is the equivalent of a stage set. And once they walk through that door, they are a character in this drama. And if they aren't careful, their character can get out of hand, can start going off script and using lines and approaches and behaviors that were not really part of what people had agreed to or whatever. And then they end up starting encountering all kinds of things, and they have to justify why they did it, and they become the victim, or they paint an even bleaker picture that requires people to relinquish their authority and control to this individual, on and on and on. So don't forget, for those who are really new to the world of the ChangeGrid is the result of combining over 400 different models into a single model. So if it seems odd that we can jump from one subject to another subject and one application to another application, it's because we see everything as the same thing. It's just tension management. And we can look at any situation through that lens. We can figure out where they are. And the moment we know where they are, we know a whole lot of stuff about what that location means, and we know the better place to be, and we know how to move you. So it is an attempt to create a single model from hundreds of models who have been proposed over thousands of years. So we can tell you what the addiction of choice is likely to be as you move from one place to another. We can tell you where people are going to become more active and inactive. We can tell you all kinds of stuff. Yeah. There you go. So any other comments, thoughts about the ChangeGrid? All right. Well, next time around, I'll just go on a limb and say, I'd like to use the PowerPoint presentation I put together so I can help you guys understand what you actually should be asking yourself as you walk along the path of self-discovery. But I love it. You know, we only have one rule in the world of tension management, and that is that we must pay attention to where people find their tension. And so I have always done my best to make sure that, although I always have something prepared, that I leave everything flexible enough that we can be more organic in our discussions, meet people where they are, give them the insights, the suggestions, the tools that are most appropriate at that moment in time. People who throw questions to us are doing more than throwing a question to us. From a tension management perspective, they're also revealing something about what's going on in their own head. So I don't necessarily know why people ask particular questions, but I know that something in their mind compelled them to ask it. And I want to make sure that, although I know nothing about what compelled them to ask it, that I do my best to give them a thorough insight and understanding of that situation so they can be back to managing their own level of tension, back on the Oracle of the Self. Okay, other thoughts? No? Then I'll thank you all very much for joining us on today's coaching call, and look forward to talking to you again next week. So thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank
You
you.
too.